Okay, so as I indicated, I'm super delighted to have with me in studio Professor Alfred Omenya, a governance expert. Asante sana for coming.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very delighted to be in national broadcaster.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and of course we were expecting Eliud Owalo, Deputy Secretary General of UDA, who's in charge of policy and strategy in that party.
Right.
And he's also an economist, and we did see the amount of work that he did in the Presidential Campaign Steering Committee. He was very instrumental. I've spoken to a number of people in ensuring that, you know, he puts all the campaign units together.
Right.
And so I was really, really excited when he accepted to come to this show. So that is his seat. It's still open. If he walks in, I would be super happy to welcoming him and just to hear what the rationale they had behind the bottom-up economic model now that they're in power.
Correct.
Right, because now it transitions. Now it's no longer a campaign issue.
Exactly.
Now it's how do we put this together?
Exactly.
Especially when the country is hurting. The economy is not doing very, very well.
Exactly.
Do you envy the president's entry?
No, I don't envy the president at all, because I mean the president is inheriting a dilapidated country, but he's also coming in with a group of supporters that want to see results almost instantly. Yes, I think the president will have to think quite carefully. If he's not careful, he might end up throwing away some of the key policy planks so as to appease people. But so far he's, I think...
He's done well.
So far he's saying, look, you guys will suffer a little bit before we actually fix this. Which is interesting. I mean, because if you look at the removal of subsidies, for example, which for him was not really a solution to the challenges that we had around prices, but basically feeding into the cartels that they were complaining about. Issues that are around fertilizer prices that again, he moved in there, and of course that affects the farmers as they are, not necessarily the hustler farmers. And he's saying, look, at the short rains are here. If we delay on any actions like this, then in fact we're just kicking the ball further down. So far I think he seemed determined to take actions to sort of deviate from short-term populist actions, which may mean that people may be quite unhappy in the short term. But create stability in the medium to long term. So far that's how I read it, because I expected hustlers to be waiting for some money
for returns almost on
their phones via M-Pesa. But he advised them that is a little bit more complex than that. There'll be a ministry for cooperative. We'll have to organize ourselves around that, and eventually have monies being channeled through more systematic ways.
One of the things, the thematic areas, and there was a lot of focus there. And you've mentioned it, the provision of cheap fertilizers. And across board, a very welcome idea. But then we also know that agriculture sector in this country is dependent upon the bimodal rainy season, meaning droughts are frequent. So the question I want to ask you is, without water, for example, for irrigation, as part of the interventions ecosystem, how do the majority small and medium scale farmers grow their food when drought is one of our realities? Do you think they'll wrap themselves around that?
I think that is something that they must do. Tom have been involved quite a bit in terms of developing programs for the country, but mainly counties, for manufacture. And what is interesting is that whatever we did, I mean, whichever way, if you develop those programs in a rational way, you end up in agriculture. Whatever you do. You know, we did these things in Kisii. We ended up there with, you know, with avocado things and coffee. We did this in Kirinyaga. We ended up with rice. You know, we did this in down at the coast in Kilifi. We ended up with, you know, fish and fish processors and so on. There were very, very few instances where we ended up with non-agriculture value chains. So the point I want to make and is that I think the government, this government is spot on. That if you're going to grow the country, whichever way, whether you're growing it from the top or from the middle or from the bottom, the nature of our economy is actually focused in agriculture, and a lot of jobs are actually in there, both small and medium and so on. So targeting that sector as the major driver of the bottom-up economy. Of course, they also referred to others like you know, the Juakali sector, you know, the Mbogas and so on. But I don't know how they'll do that one. But for agriculture, it's very, very clear that that is our priority value chain. Having said that, we have two issues here, like whatever you're highlighting. That our agriculture is actually rain-fed, and is very poorly managed. Even when we make surpluses, you know, is a problem for us. If you look at you know, crops like maize and so on. But to come to that specific issue of rain-fed agriculture, this is something that, of course, we need to wean ourselves off. But remember, as it were, weaning agriculture off the rain, the seasonal vagaries, requires investment. Requires significant capital investment. You know, of course, from government itself, in terms of the broader irrigation schemes that we are talking about, and at smaller scales, we expect you know, farmers to shift, you know, to greenhouses where there's a lot more control of all the parameters, you know, moisture, the heat in those sort of places and so on. But that's capital-intensive agriculture. Of course, we know a few, you know, wannabe farmers, rich farmers in the cities are doing that, but your typical peasant farmer does not have that sort of capital to put into agriculture. So this individual still relies almost exclusively on rain-fed agriculture, as it actually were. In fact, even if you look at the ones who are going to be the beneficiaries of the subsidized fertilizer, most of those are still going to be medium-sized to large farmers who are already organized, who are already doing this, who already have things that they're doing at scale. So the point I'm saying is that I think the president and his team are on the right track. However, I think there are quite a number of other issues that have to be dealt with, including what you're just talking about, weaning agriculture of this, you know, seasonality. And then, of course, eventually we'll have to look at value addition in agriculture. We cannot just be getting maize to consume, because that's the only reason why you can't buy maize from the farmers. If doing value addition to the maize, both for domestic consumption and for export, then in fact we would actually need you see a lot more maize, and the same with wheat, and the same with literally every single thing that we produce, be it rice, you know, millet, all the products that we're talking about, even fruits, as it actually were.
As an actually word.
Right.
It's I mean, this is out there, that you're inheriting an economy that is not in very good shape.
Right.
So the question in a lot of people's minds is, fine, we also have that issue of the debt.
Right.
That, you know, is way up there in the stratosphere.
Right.
What do you think needs to be done to surmount that? Because there's a lot of emphasis, the conversation.
Right.
Even we had that during the campaigns.
Right.
That they're going to go very strong on production, and you've got out that very, very well.
Right.
But once the president puts his cabinet in place, what challenges do you think that the CS, who's going to be in charge of finance, will face from day one upon being appointed?
It's something that the Kenya Kwanza team diagnosed very well, but they did the diagnosis, but we've not seen the prognosis and the solutions that are being put on the table, as they actually were. Yeah, because basically what we've had really is an incoherent economy. That's just what it is. That we have debt. That debt is being invested in infrastructure projects whose value is quite questionable. The direct value to the economy, in terms of how many jobs are they creating, how much more value are they producing for us in terms of productivity of capital, as it actually were. And of course, Dr. Ndi famously, and in fact we were with him in the studio at some point discussing two projects. That was the SGR and the Expressway, and starting to look at the additional new jobs that the investment in SGR and Expressway was giving to the country. So here we are paying debts, but for investments that really have not given us returns, you know, in terms of the value, both in the short term and in the long term. Now, of course, if you look at SGR and you're talking about reverting the port to the coast, to Mombasa, then it means that its potential to be productive is even less. So on the first instance, we have this non-productive debt. We've got debt that we must pay, but which was invested in projects that again, and they agree, it was invested in projects that were going to benefit private individuals. The crony capitalists, I think that the state capture guys, the fellows who are able to actually, you know, convince government to invest huge amounts of money, of taxpayers' money, most of it borrowed, into projects that were just going to benefit themselves and not necessarily the broader public. So yes, we have debt that we must pay. That is number one. Of course, number two, we need money for development. So how will we get that money for development? Is it more debt, or what do we actually do in this particular scenario? On the other hand, that debt has also caused other problems. That you know, a lot of this debt is actually domestic. So government is also competing with you and me to borrow from you know, the local banks. And what has resulted in this is that we have ridiculously high interests for domestic borrowers. In fact, we don't even have you know, money from where the ordinary person, the SMEs and so on, even you know, large-scale local private sector, you know, can actually get and inject in the economy. So how then do you grow this economy if people are broke and they have no money, you know, to put in the economy? And meanwhile, government is paying debt that is actually not productive, is not resulting in jobs, is not resulting in more taxes, is not resulting in higher productivity of capital as actually well. So I think there'll need to be a very, very clear rationalization of that model. That's how do we get the economy on its foot again? How do we ensure that the mwananchi and the investors have money in their pockets and are not competing with government? This was already achieved in Kibaki's time. Again, how do we ensure that you know, our capital investment is resulting in again, I mean, all these things we're talking about, creating more jobs, is resulting in higher productivity of capital, so that these guys can pay more taxes, and we actually generate, you know, a lot more resources and so on. And I think that's what's lacking. So far, there's no clear indication at all, and there's a challenge. I'll need to pick up with my friend David Ndi. I was hoping that Owala will be here, so that you explain to us how the entire ecosystem will work. Where you're telling us, okay, fine, you're going to create jobs. How are you going to create jobs? You're going to slow down on borrowing, hopefully, but we'll still have to borrow. And so what sort of infrastructure are you going to invest in that can start resulting in productivity of capital? Number two, you have to explain to us that in this high debt situation, what are you going to do to ensure that money is still released, number one, for investment in development, but more importantly, for you know, for the people who drive the economy. These are the investors, be they large scale, be they the mamambogas, be they small scale. Because I mean, as the Deputy President actually highlighted, if you get these Fuliza loans and so on, you're paying thousands percent in interest, and that is not, you cannot be productive even at that lower level, you know, with those sort of interest and so on. But these are the basic questions: that how do we rationalize these things? How do we bring in fiscal discipline so that money is used for what it was meant to be? How do we ensure that you know, that we have adequate savings? What do we do with these debts that we already have that are not actually productive, that was not put to good use? What do we do with them? Are we going to renegotiate terms and so on? But more importantly, regardless of what you do, how do you release money into the economy? Because that is what will actually, you know, create jobs within the domestic market. That's what will drive the domestic economy. And it is that local domestic economy that creates jobs. And anyway, the higher level economy leads to exports, which will eventually also result in stabilizing foreign exchange rates. So what I'm really yearning for you know, as an interested party in this issue, is to look at our overall economic model and to say, okay, fine, I mean, there'll have to be firefighting, actually, where some bad decisions that were made must just be reversed. But on the other hand, we must ask ourselves, what is this economic model? Totally, forget about bottoms up. I mean, for me, I want to understand the entire economic model, from the fiscal discipline, from the domestic market, from what you're exporting outside there, from stabilizing of the shilling, from interest rates. How do we link this thing, you know, with interest rates? How then do we link this thing with job creation and the expenditure, you know, within the economy? How do we link this thing to revenue generation? How do we link it to higher taxes for government? And then eventually, how do we win ourselves of you know, foreign loans, you know, to fund infrastructure?
Actually, that's why we had invited Eliud to just come and, you know, paint for us those areas that needed a bit of clarity. But let me the president is out of the country. And he went to the UK, and we know after that he has some work to do. How do you think that those visits to the UK, and I think later on he will be going to the United States as well, inside the first 100 days, how do you think that is going to impact Kenya's standing on that global front?
I think the president is doing the right thing. I think the only thing that I was not comfortable with was the Western Sahara issue, which I think is being dealt with. But I think it is important, really, that you know, our traditional allies are comfortable with the new leadership. Whatever you say, because I mean, at the end of the day, we are looking at again, a broader global system, and this system is not just political; it's also economic. There'll be quite a number of issues that one would actually look at there. And you need this, the support of our big brothers, whether you look at it from you know, World Bank facilities, whether you look at it from, you know, borrowing from IMF, whether you look at it from issues around governance within the UN, whether you look at it from grants, whether you look at it from, you know, climate change and stuff like that. Our traditional partners are actually, you know, those are the people who have largely been investing in the country, and yes, of course, I mean, we have corporations from those countries that typically tend to come in with the big monies at the top there. If you're going to establish any serious industries to speak of, which must still continue, and this is why my own model is growth from the top, from the middle, and from the bottom. It is not just growth from the bottom. Because typically it is those big investors at the top there who largely invest for export, and they're there here already. I mean, whether you look at your big tea factories, whether you look at your Parethrams, whether you look at you know, the big guys in the financial sectors and so on. And what you're saying is that this must continue, actually, and we must broaden that, while at the same time we need to actually start looking at you know, investors that then grow the middle, and basically what I'm looking at here is a huge working class. I mean, it would be so interesting if, say, we are able to bring in, say, you know, 10 million new jobs or 20 million new jobs and so on. Yes, and at that level you really are looking at a mix. The guys at the top there, because of the high levels of mechanization and sophistication, may not always have the numbers, but yes, I mean,
they have the knowledge capital, they have the skill set.
They have the skills, so and even the financial capital to actually inject there. Yes, so those must actually continue, and must consolidate them. And then at the same time, you know, we need to then be very, very clear. So how do we develop the middle and how do we develop the bottom?
So it's a bit too early to expect magic, isn't it? Because even when you look at it, usually the first 100 days is not about doing this. It's more of spending time running an audit, a quick one, identifying where the pain points are, and prescribing solutions for those pain points, and then saying, this is the direction that we want to go, this is the baseline, therefore we'll use it to identify our targets and the timelines and so on. So you would say that it's a bit premature to expect turnarounds almost immediately.
Exactly.
Because with all fairness, even in corporate, you need time to run audits and identify where...
Well, I mean, even a small eatery business, you need 5 years to to break even and actually start seeing the benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you see, to me, this is where we need to really think, and the team that's working with the new president, fortunately, was there in the Kibaki-NARC government bit. Yeah, because what you saw there was broadly policies, both social and economic policies, and extensive planning that happened within that particular period. And it was interesting that actually, if you do it right, you start getting the benefits quite soon. By quite soon, I mean you start getting that in the medium term. By the second year. Why? Because I mean, if you rationalize this thing, you introduce fiscal discipline, you introduce some of these initial policies and so on, those things will actually find their way in the next year's budget. So you start rationalizing how government is spending, government expenditure, almost immediately. But of course, the impact of that to be felt, because I mean, this budget that the president is implementing is the last Uhuru Kenyatta's budget. His own budget, we've not even started the budgetary process. But then my concern is that if you don't have clarity of policy direction, and if you don't have clarity of plans, and for me the real key thing is these economic plans. So again, the guys working on this need to thrash this thing out like yesterday, because a lot of the things that the president is going to do, a lot of the decisions that the president is going to make, everything from taxation levels to priority infrastructure projects, to social spending, to those hustler fund issues and so on. A lot of them are actually going to be within the ambit of that particular economy. If they proceed to do a lot of those things outside, then they'll be no different from the Uhuru Kenyatta government that basically did things by fiat, as opposed to this.
So as we wind down, when you look ahead, what are you seeing in the next 300 days?
Well, I think what I'm seeing really is I would say a mixed bag. And you could see it. I think what we're going to see in the next 300 days is more or less what we saw right at the start of this presidency. That
very decisive, you think?
Partly decisive, but just most of them just pragmatic. And that's why I'm praying that this core of coherent plans are in place. Because I think what the president will do, he'll be making pragmatic decisions on a case-by-case basis. Saying, this I can make, like swearing on the judges. Swear them in, straight away.
What does it say something?
Exactly.
Surely.
That decisiveness is important, because again, there are quite a number of things that can be done without developing a national plan and developing a national budget, like swearing in on the judges, for example. And some which were just wrong decisions, you see, like the pot issue, you can also make such a decision and then quickly follow it up to ensure that that's actually implemented. However, what I don't see happening is actually that sort of coherent policy framework that then you actually start implementing. I think it is now that this team will actually be focusing on that. Fortunately, and I've been telling people that actually we are lucky in a way, because this particular election did not have too many issues. The two candidates that were running for this election were ready to lead from day one. And yes, the things they needed to fix and so on, but they were ready to lead from day one, compared to other previous elections where we've had our own local issues and so on. And that's why the president comes in, he makes these pronouncements, already shaping our foreign policy. He'll be coming back again, setting up his government. So I expect that they'll move a lot faster than the two previous governments have done.
That's a good place to leave it. Moving a lot faster. I want to thank you so much. Unfortunately, we can't cover all these issues inside the time that was allocated for us. Professor Alfred Omenya, government expert.
Thank you, Tom.
I want to thank you so much for finding time and honoring our invitation.